Lesson 7.4, Congruence. Polygons, or shapes made up of all straight sides, are said to be congruent if the two shapes are the same shape. Oops, let's see, let me get my pen tool out here. Sorry about that. They're congruent if they have the same shape and the same size. So polygons are said to be congruent if both are the same shape and both are the same size. When we talk about congruence, there's a special symbol for that. And it looks like this. It's an equal sign with a squiggly line over it. That means congruent. So in summary, two shapes are congruent if they're both the exact same shape and the exact same size. Take a look at these two triangles here at the bottom of the page. These are congruent because if I took one of them and turned it slightly, I could lay it on top of the other one and it would fit over it exactly. They're the exact same shape and the exact same size, so they are said to be congruent. Before we continue on talking about shapes that are congruent, I just want to mention that as we talk about these shapes, we're going to name them. And the way that you name any polygon is you pick a vertice or a corner, and you start at that corner and then list the other vertices in order. So, for example, I could start here at B, and I could call this polygon B, A, E, D, C. Notice I started at B, and then I just went in order around the polygon. I could start here at C. I could call it polygon C, B, A, E, D. I started at C and I just went around the polygon in order. So it doesn't matter where you choose to begin, but that is how you name a polygon. And so as we move forward in this video and you hear me naming polygons, I want you to understand how I'm doing that. So congruent angles and congruent sides. Congruent angles are the angles that line up when you slide two congruent shapes on top of one another. So if I were to take polygon A, B, C, D, and I were just to turn that a quarter of a turn to the right. So if I were to take it and turn it one turn this way, it would line up exactly over polygon E, F, G, H. And the angles that lined up one right on top of each other would be said to be congruent. When we talk about congruent sides, we mean the sides that are congruent are the sides that line up when you slide two congruent shapes over one another. So again, very same thing. If I were to take polygon A, B, C, D and turn it just a quarter turn, and line it up over E, F, G, H, there are certain sides that would line up. So this is what we mean when we say congruent sides and congruent angles. They are the angles and the sides that line up directly on top of one another when I slide two congruent shapes on top of one another. Now, let's talk about how we're going to write this. Let's look at the angles first. Let's take A, B, D, C, and let's just turn it a quarter turn. And let's imagine what that would look like. If I turned that just a quarter turn, A would be here, B would be here, D here, and C here. So remember, the definition of congruent angles are two angles that line up on top of one another when two shapes are lined up. So here's what I would say. I would say angle A is congruent to angle E. I would say that angle B is congruent to angle F. I can say that angle D is congruent to angle G. In other words, they line up right on top of one another. I can say that angle C is congruent to angle H. That's how I would list congruent angles. Congruent sides, let's look at that. I can say that side AB is congruent to side EF. Notice that AB and EF would be one right on top of the other if I lined up these polygons. I can say that side BD is congruent to side FG. I can say that side I can say that side DC is congruent to side GF. And then finally, I can say that side CA is congruent to side HE. Again, those are the sides that line up on top of one another when I slide these two polygons over each other. In this picture, we have polygon A, B, D, C, and it is congruent to polygon F, E, H, G. And so we've been given 4 things to figure out. Our job is to figure out the measure of angle F, the measure of angle H, the size of side EF, and the size of side EH. Well, if we understand that 2 polygons which are congruent have congruent angles and congruent sides, that means the side lengths are the same and the angle measures are the same. So let's look at the measure of angle F. If we were to take this polygon here, FEHG, and we were to turn that upwards, let's think about F would line up with A, E would line up with B, H would line up with D, and G would line up with C. So the measure of angle F is the same as angle A. It would be 110 degrees. The measure of angle H would line up with D, so it is 70 degrees. Now let's look side EF. EF would line up here with AB. So the size of EF is 5.4 centimeters. EH would line up with side BD. So it has a measure of 5.6 centimeters. Congruent polygons have the same side lengths and the same angle measures. Now, here's a reminder of what I just said. Congruent angles have the same measurement. Congruent sides have the same length. I would like for you to list the congruent angles and the congruent sides. And once you've made that list, I'd like for you to turn the video back on and check your answers with mine. So as you check your answers, keep in mind that both of these polygons have 5 corners, so I should have 5 congruent angles listed. If they have 5 corners, they have 5 sides, so I should have 5 congruent sides listed. So take a minute and check your work before you submit your notes to Seesaw.